Hello and welcome to another chat. I want to talk about how changing face of naval warfare could give small countries such as Guyana an advantage were it to find itself invaded by Venezuela. So, spoiler alert, this is going to be mainly about how Guyana could use uncrewed service vessels, explosive drones basically, similar to what Ukraine is using in the Black Sea, to really change the equation for potential invasion from Venezuela. So I am H.I. Sutton. I'm an independent defense analyst. I focus on unconventional naval warfare. Check out my social media and also my website. But let's get on with it. Venezuela, as you know, is a country in South America, and there's a much smaller country next to it called Guyana. Now, Venezuela is about 10 times larger than Guyana and also has very large oil reserves, large military, that sort of thing. Problematically, Venezuela claims about half or more than half of Guyana, basically everything west of the main river in Guyana. This claim is, of course, historical, but it's very much come into focus recently because Guyana has discovered oil off the shore. So Guyana is now rich in oil. Venezuela, as I mentioned, has large oil reserves, in fact, the largest in the world, but it wants more. Additionally, the Maduro regime in Venezuela isn't that popular, and they might see war as a unifying or political valuable action. So, from Guyana's perspective, it needs to defend against it. What is it defending against? Well, let's start by looking mainly at the navy. Venezuelan navy is comparatively large, certainly compared to Guyana, but I'll come on to Guyana's navy in a minute. The main warship of the Venezuelan navy are these corvettes. There's three of them in service. They're comparatively modern and well armed. In fact, they've recently been upgraded, at least two of them have, with Chinese anti-ship missiles. They also have some missile boats, some from Iran and some older ones from the UK originally. And these are pretty serious inshore threats as well. They have enough landing ships to do some sort of an amphibious operation. They could seize an island or potentially even invade Georgetown itself. I think, with the current state or the comparative size and readiness of the Guyanan military, it's questionable. They could try something quite bold. The troops that land, you see here some riverine troops. They could also operate in jungle, of course. They're equipped with a mix of Russian and Chinese equipment. I think that pretty much describes the Venezuelan military. But they also have some quite exotic things, such as this mini submarine. This was actually acquired from Italy. It was a civilian vessel, but still very capable, designed or intended for use in the oil industry. In recent years, it seems to have been acquired by the military. We don't know exactly what they want to use it for, but it's a very capable little boat. They also have quite modern Coast Guard vessels. This is where the bad news for the Venezuelan military comes in. We're going to talk a little bit about, it's a little bit of a paper tiger, let's say. There used to be four of those Coast Guard vessels, but now there's only three because one of them picked a fight with a cruise liner. Now, you'd think that a warship versus a cruise liner, of course, the warship should win, but actually, it was an ice-hardened cruise liner, so an icebreaker. And this is the winner, cruise liner. The joke, you should see the other guy. Well, you can't see the other guy. It's at the bottom of the ocean. The patrol ship was sunk. Quite a lesson. I don't think many warships could take a ramming fight with an icebreaker, but certainly humiliating for the Venezuelans and points to a much greater problem than just their equipment. Here's another example of their problems. These corvettes were intended to be armed or originally armed with the Millennium gun, which is a very capable anti-aircraft gun, very modern actually, delivered, of course, before sanctions. But at least one of them has recently been downgraded with a ZU-23, the ubiquitous 23 millimeter anti-aircraft gun, basically. This is a massive downgrade in capability terms and points to the impact of sanctions, spares, and so on. Those corvettes, three in service, they also used to be four, but again, like the patrol boat, one sunk. Different situation. This points to uh, poor maintenance, but also possibly other issues, corruption and general poor training, poor standards within the Venezuelan military. Also, on paper, you'll find that they have a couple of submarines, Type 209 submarines. These would be a serious threat for Guyana were they in service, but they're not. So you might see them on paper, but they're not in the water and haven't been in years. The same is true of their frigates. They have some Lupo class frigates. I think they'll still be listed in some, lists of naval vessels, but none of them are active. Having said that, the Venezuelan military, the Navy, remains much more formidable than Guyana's. As the moment, they could basically sail anywhere in Guyana waters and there'd be nothing Guyana could do about it. This is the most modern and capable of Guyana's vessels. It's a patrol boat. It's tiny, and while it is a good-looking little boat, it's no match for the Venezuelan Navy. And the rest of their fleet, if you can call it that, are basically small ribs and patrol boats. Again, some of them are nice looking boats, quite modern, but they're no match. So how could this change? Well, if Guyana were to acquire uncrewed service vessels, they could rebalance things almost overnight. This is one of the Ukrainian ones that has been used to great effect in Black Sea. With these vessels, they'd be able to defend the offshore oil platforms and defend the coast against amphibious landings, things like this. I don't think that the Venezuelan military is well equipped or well trained to deal with a threat like this. So it would probably be very effective. And we're talking about the most basic USVs, uncrewed service vessels, the sort of thing that has an explosive charge in it. You ram the target, it blows up. Current ones used in the Black Sea have a range approximately enough to get you to a city called Barcelona. You can see on the map here. There's actually a big oil terminal near there, so it would be useful. And this is assuming you launch your operation from Georgetown, which is halfway along the coast of Guyana. If you were to start as close to the border as possible, you could, of course, reach further. But they're not going to reach all the way across the other side unless they're modified or there's some ingenuity involved. I think that there are several ways that they could get the USVs to reach all the way along the coast. It's definitely possible, and they could start having a strategic impact and punish Venezuela in ways that is very difficult for Venezuela to counter. In terms of designs, there's many. These are Ukrainian ones. Mercury you've probably heard of. Um, the Seawolf Nordex, Stalker, and the Catran. There are many. In fact, there are quite a lot of different types. Here's just some of the uh, publicly known ones, one of my graphics from my website. But the point is that Ukraine has no shortage of designs and a willingness to export. But if you weren't getting them directly from Ukraine, there are comparable or similar inspired, Ukrainian inspired, should we say, designs around the world. These are, again, just some of the brands that you could look to. There are others. But the key point is to develop a fleet of these vessels, not one or two, not a demonstration, but to have enough that you can deter and then fight with them. If these photographs, which are all from Ukraine, of course, if these photographs were from locations in Guyana, I think Venezuela would think twice. They have quite a chilling effect on any invasion plans. And there's plenty of places they could hide them. These vessels do not need to be in a big, expensive port like a typical warship. They can be hidden at fishing towns or at other dispersed sites along rivers. And there's many rivers and tributaries and places to hide them. This is just a fishing village. I picked it because there's a great photo online, but it shows how easy it would be to hide USVs among these vessels and or along the edges of these tributaries. And of course, narco submarines give us a good idea of how easy that is to do. Guyana does have a problem with narco submarines, much less I'd say, than many other countries in South America, but they aren't unheard of, and they've found several in the jungle. It is possible to build and hide narco submarines in the jungle. I'm not for a moment suggesting that narco submarines should be the basis for the USVs, and I'm not suggesting that the people who build narco submarines are particularly useful as individuals, but it does demonstrate how Guyana could hide these capabilities and make them very difficult for Venezuela to counter. In addition to the USVs that we've talked about, Guyana could also take another leaf out of Ukraine's playbook. They could use long-range drones to strike deep into Venezuela. Venezuela does have a lot of air defenses, some pretty sophisticated missiles from Russia, radars from China, fighter jets, of course, aircraft, and some older systems. A lot on paper, and these are quite capable, but I think the jungle is pretty big and they would have great difficulty actually countering this threat. More to the point, even if they do shoot down some drones, it's not a good cost, you know, not a good return on investment of these expensive missile systems. The drones could target strategic targets on the coast, air bases as well, things like this. Um, but combined with the maritime drones, it could really change the equation. At the moment, Guyana is essentially undefended. Their only defense is allies. Brazil, maybe the US, maybe Western European allies. But as we know, the current world does not favor alliances. You know, alliances are quite unreliable. This would give Guyana an independent sovereign capability to deter, to fight, and ultimately to punish Venezuela should they try to seize the oil fields or part of the country. Thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, usual stuff.